switch the bits and bobs. Hello, my friends. Welcome to a brand new episode of What's Missing in Marketing Today. Today, I'm going to be talking to Connor all about video editing, marketing, and of course, video production as a whole, and why it's, I would argue, actually, at the moment, I'm sure you would agree, Connor, something that you can't not do right now in 2026 and as we move forward into the rest of 26, but of course into 27 as well. But before we get into that and we get into a bit more about your background, what do you think is missing in marketing today, Connor?
I think aggressive patience is missing from marketing today. A lot of people jump from trend to trend. A lot of people jump from thing to thing. You very rarely see people stick it out and target one format, one platform, one approach for 1 year. That is boring, but boring actions tend to produce sexy results. That's my philosophy. And I don't see enough people doing that.
I love that. And I think, I mean, just building off that quickly, I think, especially January, right? It's that,
Mhm.
or it can be. I was going to say it is, but it doesn't always necessarily have to be. Is there a question mark? Is there I do the actions, I do the things, I do all the right stuff, I put the videos out, I invest in the editor, I keep things moving forward. But when's the till going to start ringing? When's this work gonna, is that likely in January? Is that a January thing in your experience, would you say?
I think it's entirely dependent on the industry the person is in and their offer. So I think if video is generally failing you, I don't think it's necessarily the fault of the video. It might be the structure around it. So people might enjoy the video, they might land on your profile, might land on your services, ultimately decide possibly it's not for them. There might be a pricing structure, it might not be the correct time for them to invest. So there could be a multitude of reasons, but I would say consistency on camera, deliberately speaking to your ICP over and over and over again. If you're doing that and you're not seeing sales, then I would say strongly the video is not the problem. So, in regards to, so to answer your question, no, I don't think that's a problem, but I do think people are quick to jump on it saying, oh, I'm not getting engagement, I'm not getting leads, I'm not getting this, that, and the other. That's fine, that's fair enough. So maybe you haven't been aggressively patient as I mentioned. Are you combining the video with outreach? Are you just launching a video, sitting there waiting and twiddling your thumbs, waiting for it to come back to you? Because if you are, you're wasting your time. So what else are you doing alongside that? So if you're not doing anything else alongside that, then your video definitely isn't to blame.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, like, yes, of course the video is part of that structure, part if it's done correctly, right? It sits in that sales process, sales funnel, or maybe like just top end on marketing as well, depending on of course what you're doing. But I think we I guess in sometimes in the past we don't always take self accountability 100% to like why things are busy, why things are quiet, why things are maybe not the desired business as a whole that we're looking for. I mean, a lot of the work you do is very remote editing style. Was that a choice that you chose to have that maybe location freedom or to have the kind of, I guess, in some ways, future proofing of, yeah, I don't need to be necessarily going to see my clients on a day to day basis? Or like, how did you sort of get into remote editing? Because I think so many people, they look at like maybe what I do or maybe the production side and they maybe look at it as a full package. But something I wanted to discuss with you, of course, was actually to get the best of both worlds. I think there's so much more that can be done, and sometimes actually having a different person's perspective when it comes to the editing side can be the reason why the video does, that 1% better or that 2% better, etc. In regards to quality.
Sure. So I personally jumped into remote editing purely because of the fact that in my last place of employment, which was a car dealership, it's the one aspect of my digital marketing job that I thoroughly enjoyed, and I kind of had it as a bit of a an advantage that we were doing that every single day we were just churning out video content because I had the freedom with the camera and I had the freedom with the movement. I had the freedom what else goes out. And I thought, this is absolutely powerful. Why the hell aren't people doing this? Then I thought to myself, well, I'm not a videographer. I don't pretend to be, but what I can do, I can make existing footage look incredible. So the reason I didn't move, I moved purely into the editing level. Like obviously people need videographers. If that's what you need, that's not a problem. I work very closely with videographers and I respect that they do. But I believe personally that the value comes in what you actually produce in terms of what you're saying and the lessons that you're giving rather than the quality of the production value itself, rather than the quality of the camera footage itself, so to speak. So it's all well and good just having like, if you want to hire a videographer, by all means do so. But there's absolutely nothing wrong whatsoever with just taking your camera, taking your phone camera out, hitting record, spewing value over and over and over again, and doing that consistently and churning that out. So when I realized that the consistency side and the editing side are realistically, they are actually more important than the videography side, in my opinion. That's when I decided to lean into this. So there are occasions where I do need videography assistance. So when that's the case, obviously I outsource that. I play my strengths. So but just personally, I just felt like it was for the audience that I wanted to help and the message that I wanted to spread. I just felt that was just more of a priority.
I think that's an interesting point, man. I think sometimes we look at maybe like what the Stephen Bartlett's of the world are doing,
Mhm.
or the it's insert large name here are doing, and we maybe don't necessarily consider that. Like I kind of agree and I kind of don't agree with
Mhm.
your point in regards to production, right? But the reason why I think it's different is because it is about the perception you want to give over every time, right?
I
Because
agree.
I think you can have an okay video, and everything we do with video and everything we do in marketing has to be structure led and systems led in respect to I'm going to add these specific points or these specific bits of value to my ideal consumer, my ideal person, right? And as someone who does phone videos and production videos and well edited videos, etc., like I see them as different. They do different jobs, right? For
Mhm.
me, and I think the initial point, if like you're gonna, if maybe someone's listening to this or they are actually in a position where they're like, yeah, that sounds cool, Colton, but I've got a lot to say now and I don't really want to spend the money or it's all complicated or etc. I mean, what would you say to those people who are maybe on the fence about bar like just starting, which is the obvious one? But is there anything else that maybe someone can either self plan, self edit, self produce that maybe has like very little budget and they want to start getting their teeth into this concept that we call video, right?
Yeah. So the advice I always give to people in terms of how to start things like that, I'm not going to say the typical advice: just get out your phone, just do it, left, right, and center. Like, a lot of people just say that, but it's an interesting fact of like people can just easily just start, but it's a case of what do you actually say, essentially. So my favorite place to start and what I recommend anyone do is kind of design yourself a frequently asked question section like you would do for your landing page, and rather than just writing them down and launching them and trying to direct people to them, say each one to camera, because if these frequently asked questions are coming up and you answer them on camera, they're going to do two very good distinct jobs. So firstly, you can actually direct if anyone lands in your DMs and they give you one of these frequently asked questions. Oh, actually, mate, I made a nice video about that. Here's the link to go and watch that video. Secondly, if your clients or prospects have these questions, 9 times out of 10, your ICP has these questions too. So it's a good place to start in terms of a video strategy. So just write down your most commonly frequently asked questions, and then get those on camera. So that is, I find, quite a powerful place to start.
No, I completely agree. I mean, then say someone's been doing that then for three,
Hmm.
6 months, right? They've gained some traction, they're getting some confidence, they love what they're doing on their phone, or maybe they've like worked with someone like us, and maybe they've done a few videos, etc. I mean, at what point should someone really look to I guess there's a two-part question here. A, bring in production, basically what I would call full-time or like consistently to continue to up that quality, to give that perception of professionalism, to give that perception of so they actually don't have to think about is it in focus, is it well lit,
Hmm.
does it sound good, etc. But then also just to bridge onto what you do as well, like at what point do they then bridge onto having either a remote editor or doing something that some would describe as a bit more showy when it comes to their editing style?
Sure. So I think someone potentially should invest in high production when it's a feasible option in terms of a financial option. So me personally, like obviously, if you've grown some momentum in terms of video production, sorry, in terms of video posting, and you're enjoying it and it's bringing inquiries, obviously you think, okay, I'm going to invest in this, and I get that. I personally don't see it as 100% necessary. My business would have to absolutely skyrocket overnight, like literally treble my yearly revenue for me to even consider that. Because I'm a big believer of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. The setup you're seeing me in now, I just literally put my phone in the corner and talk and turn the recording off and edit directly from here, and that brings me leads, that brings me clients, that keeps my business alive. So I'm of the basis of if it ain't broke, don't fix it. So I'll probably continue to do that up until a point where I upgrade purely because I want to. So to answer your question in terms of upgrading content quality, ask yourself these two questions. Firstly, is what you're doing working? And secondly, is it really necessary? So if it isn't really necessary and what you're doing is working, in my opinion, what's the point?
Mm.
So if something's working, why change it? And secondly, to answer your question about when someone should invest in an editor, I think personally is when also when the financial aspects come to light, but also to the point where if you've got your recording set up and your recording structure down and you're ready and you understand the value and you think, okay, my time is better spent handing this off to an editor and then I can reinvest that time into actually generating more leads and more business, then is the right time, essentially. Because editing, if you're not a professional editor, well, even for me, I'm a professional editor and it takes up a lot of time. Editing can absolutely chew through your day. So when you're a founder, when you're an expert, when you're a business owner, realistically offloading that process and then reinvesting that time elsewhere probably will return your investment tenfold
Yeah.
over time. Absolutely, I think that will. So the time aspect of it, I think we all know as business owners, time is more valuable than money. So when you offload that and it stops chewing through your day, so in the case of anyone who works with me, for example, you record your footage, give it to me. Within 3 weeks, you've got your highly polished content ready to utilize. You can spend that 3 weeks concentrating on your business and maximizing cash flow or whatever it is that you do.
Yeah.
So it's that peace of mind, really. So when you're ready to buy peace of mind, essentially, and you feel like, yeah, I can actually offload this, that's the right time to pull the trigger.
I think I completely agree, and I think as well, like that would be, and it's, I guess in some ways it's actually down to, as we said at the beginning, kind of around what that business is really
Mm-hmm.
looking to build. So a lot of the people we work with is professional services. They they want to consistently show up in a manner that would be described and seen as a professional way to consume content, right? Now, not to say they shouldn't necessarily do with the odd phone video or etc. They shouldn't do that, but if they're looking at, say, like a website video or like a
Mm-hmm.
LinkedIn video, for example, I would argue that actually the potential client that's going to look at that, they're looking at, when you get a lawyer involved, when you get an accountant involved, it's normally around stuff that you would count really seriously, and
I agree.
you should increase that level of trust by the fact that what you put out consistently, but also how it feels when it comes across. And I think there's two balances there, which you could do on using a webcam or a phone. Yes, if you were working with a polished editor like yourself, for example, you could polish that up. But then what I would argue is actually, well, is the footage the weekend of that chain at that point to really become that trust engine for you? And that's something that we focus to work with our clients, is like, actually, let's build an entire system that leaves no question marks, right, on
I
the
agree.
professionalism, how you come across, etc. But it's very easy for us to say that about, you know we're clearly very competent in the respect to how to come across, how to talk to our ISP, or unique selling proposition, or like the person we're trying to talk to, right? That group of people who we're trying to talk to. Where would you say, from your view as an editor, or where is like maybe your job harder as an editor, looking at how people are creating their footage necessarily? So, is it actually it falls apart because of the energy maybe wasn't as good from the presenter, or they didn't do enough pre-production, or maybe they're actually struggling because they've got too many ideas? It's like, what, for those who are listening, I mean, what can they do, I guess, to make, I guess the golden question here is, what can they do to make when the prep before a video is filmed, before they create that footage, to make your job easier as an editor, which in turn means, I would argue, you can then spend more time looking at how do you add that 1% on the video, rather than having to fix those mistakes as a whole.
Sure, I completely get where you're coming from, and I do get asked this question a lot, especially by my prospects. So there's three areas I always say to people. Realistically, you can check this off in 2 minutes; it's not an issue, but it massively, massively makes my job as an editor much easier, and as a result, allows me to make your content just that little bit better. So, firstly, lighting. A lot of people undervalue this, and like the value of a good light setup can seriously affect your content quality, because obviously with low light, pixelation is seen a bit more easily, and relevancy and relevant to that edit, it does actually make my job a lot easier. So if you don't have a ring light or anything like that, a very easy hack: just simply stand in front of the window. It's that simple. Natural light is very, very good. So make sure you have a decent lighting setup. Secondly, I want you to remove as much friction as possible from the setup. So therefore it actually makes your life easier. And once you enjoy it and your life is easy, it makes my life easier. So what I mean by removing friction is I want to walk you through that setup just before you actually pull the trigger. So in the case of me, for example, I have my phone set up in the corner, but I always have my phone plugged into my laptop at all times. So whenever I'm finished the recording, as soon as I press stop, it's automatically synchronized into my laptop, and within 5 minutes, it's already ready and uploaded on my Premiere Pro. So if you can reduce the friction between once you finish recording and then getting that content to me, it's going to reduce your mental load massively, I would say. So in order to actually do that, I tend to walk my clients through the process from start to finish before we actually start. So I make sure they have a G Drive set up. Sometimes I'll make sure they have the G Drive app already immediately set up on their phone. So when they're actually done, I can make sure they synchronize it directly to my file without me even asking for it, essentially. So reducing the friction is one of the easiest things we can do. And thirdly, if we can help it, so and this is dependent on where we're actually placing the footage. So I like to work for LinkedIn and YouTube. But what I will actually ask my clients to do, I will actually ask them to record in landscape, even if we're going for portrait. I will actually ask them to record in landscape, but I'll make sure they position themselves in the middle third and with plenty of scope above their head, because that serves two purposes. One, I can very easily repurpose that to portrait if I need to without dropping quality. And secondly, it gives me as much versatility as your editor as possible. Because if you record in landscape with enough scope to actually repurpose the portrait, you only have to record once. It's that simple. Because a landscape video, you can add captions and that goes straight on LinkedIn. That footage then can be cropped for portrait. It can also go on LinkedIn, can go on Instagram, go on YouTube, and the obvious one that can also go on YouTube itself. So I try and reduce friction in that sense by making sure they have good enough lighting, making sure the process is as easy as possible for them, and making sure that they give me as much versatile content as possible so I can cover all grounds, but just by a single 5, 10, 15-minute recording, essentially. So
Yeah.
founders like it when you reduce as much friction as possible. So basically I say to a founder, all I need you to do is get in front of the camera 15 to 20 minutes per month, and I can basically cover all grounds for you. So I'm all about reducing friction, and founders love that.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and I think that's one of the reasons why you should bring in a quote unquote pro, right? Like, I think
Mm-hmm.
it's we know the systems and the ways that we need to create the content that's going to then perpetually perform. I guess the lead up or the reason why someone would then do it would be, is it just that planning stage in the respect to like the, because I've always been a big advocate, especially this year and the kind of the back end into last year, where I'm spending more time in for my own content, but also for clients as well. You know, I'm spending more time in the pre-production window of time than I'm actually spending when it comes to actually like production time. So when I have that production time in a studio, when I have that production time with that client for the day or etc., depending on what we're doing, there's no question marks on how we're going to utilize our time. So
Sure.
there's and
I
there's
No, I was going to say sure. I get that. Sorry,
no,
man. Carry on.
no, it's all good. I think, yeah, but I think for me, I think that's the key, and I think that's what sometimes people don't focus on as a whole. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
then your job as an editor, then my job as a production professional is going to be, let's add that. You know, let's really tune the language. Let's tweak instead of having to maybe problem solve on the day about, oh well we've got this extra time. What can we use it for, etc. I mean, is it? I guess, but I guess the question then runs on to that: is it better to have is a quality and quantity balance, right? Because some people was going to say that you should be posting, say, once a week on LinkedIn, for example, or once a
Mm-hmm.
week on YouTube, and that should be the best video it possibly could be, right? Others would say, actually, you should post on the daily or multiple times a day to be able to hit or learn from your audience, your ISP, etc., related to what they really care about. So then you can create maybe the more polished videos, etc. Or if you've got that kind of rhythm. But I guess the golden question that maybe someone watching this would be asking would be, how would you say someone should tackle their socials if their objective is going to be they want to be visible and they want to actually make it work for their business? Because it's very easy for us to say, well, you know, you should do X and Y, but everyone's going to ask, well, what's the golden answer then? Should I be
Mm-hmm.
daily? Should I be weekly? Should I be monthly? What do you think?
I think the sweet spot for video content, especially, so we'll take LinkedIn for example. I think 3 times a week at least should be your golden spot. Because of that, I always we offer 12 videos a month as our package, and for that very good reason. But I find three times a week is the sweet spot because I there's always that debate over quality versus quantity. I believe in quality at quantity.
Yeah.
So 3 videos a week gives me enough scope to give you enough attention on that video to make it very high quality, but at the same time, enough leverage to not overproduce, so to speak. So I've kind of found that sweet spot. So I think 3 times a week should be your preference. And I don't think, because if I see 7 videos a week from you, if I see a video every single day from you that's relatively basic, yes, you might be getting your message across, but you're kind of limiting yourself in the fact that you might not be standing out as much as anyone else you might see on the platform. But at the same time, if you go super, super, super high quality and you're only posting 1 video a week, you're almost limiting yourself in the scope that you can be seen. So balance is key in this area. So that's why, after thorough research and thorough planning, myself and my wife came up with the prospect of 12 videos per month. Like, we do feel like that's a very good balance
And are they
in
all?
terms of short form.
Yeah. And are they all directly tied to like this is going to move the journey forward revenue wise, or should someone potentially look at like, hey, I've got this like fun idea, maybe not necessarily working like getting you to edit it necessarily, but they got this quick idea after a meeting on a video, and maybe with those elements, so maybe you got, you know, your 3 videos a week for example, and then you've got maybe those 2 other slots that you could either follow with written content, image content, etc. But should people then actually like pull away the mask a little bit and have more raw, gonna quick and dirty, like on my phone content? Do you think?
Absolutely. You see it all the time. You see it all the time. So I would never discourage that. But I would always say, if you're just doing that, then maybe obviously you might want to upgrade that a little bit. So again, one of the reasons why we offer 12 a month is because of 2 reasons. One, so firstly, we kind of don't want to interfere with their current marketing platform. So if I was to go all out and offer people 28 videos a month for argument's sake, then in theory, yeah, they'd have a video going out a day, but that they could realistically post not much else. And I don't really want to interfere with what people are doing. But secondly, it kind of gives them the scope to experiment as well. So if a thought just immediately came to mind and you wanted to actually get that out in a very quick video, obviously you don't want to send that footage to me. You want to get it out immediately. So that would leave you enough scope to do that. So I would never discourage someone from doing that. So yeah, I would actively recommend that if that's what you wanted to do, but I wouldn't lean on that for the structure. That could be a daily habit to get into. So it's, I don't know about you, but it's quite annoying that LinkedIn doesn't have shorts.
Mm,
Sorry, it's quite annoying LinkedIn doesn't have stories. Is what I meant to say.
yeah.
So you could realistically get those out. And I experiment with uh, stories all the time on the likes of Instagram, and whatever response I get from that, potentially I could bring forward for a more high quality video. But yeah, to answer your question, I would never discourage anyone from doing that as long as that's not your base, so to speak.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, I think for me and something that I've been thinking about for probably like the last 6 months, I would say, but really executed on this month is having like clear understandings of what each platform requires in regards
Hmm.
to its content. And then, like, so for example, I'll use YouTube and LinkedIn because you used it earlier as the example. For me, that's where I put my top, I would say, 10% of my content. So in
Mm.
regards to, I know it's hitting the right like marks in regards to what the message is, how it comes across, how I come across, etc. But also like the best quality content I can produce. Like I'm not looking for volume more this year on LinkedIn. I personally post once a day, but that's
Hmm.
because I know how to post produce and use and extract as much as I can, along with them throwing in lives, etc., etc.,
Love it.
to to be able to do that because there is a barrier, but the barrier is more my time than necessarily a constant financial resource spend on it
Sure.
because I own all the kit, because I know what I'm doing. And also, it then has a byproduct of clients are constantly seeing me high production. So then it's a good idea and they feel like I'm the go to person when it's right for them. But the crux of what I was going to say is like when it comes to like short form platforms like TikTok or Instagram, etc. That's when I'll be like really experimental and where I'll maybe be a bit more aggressive in regards to my posting output. as a
Hmm.
whole, and like also on YouTube Shorts as well. Like I'm very particular on my long form stuff, and I want it to be very specific and very targeted and very well cut and very well edited and very polished. But also but then on the short form stuff, it's like actually it's only going to have a shelf life of maybe 12 hours, and it's where I get to experiment with language. I get to experiment with like look for those outcropper videos, and even
Hmm.
if I first film it on my phone, I'm testing language, I'm testing reaction, I'm testing how well did it do when I did it on my phone. Because then when I come into a studio day, or I look for a performance video, or I look for like a podcast theme, I can then take those themes that I already know work with my audience and then
Hmm.
go, okay, cool, we can now polish those up. So you're not necessarily going to invest time, energy, and resources and editing time and so on potentially dead topics. But it leads on to my next question, which was going to be around like, you talk a lot about shipping content, right?
Hmm.
What would you class posting or someone who's just recording content and then versus like shipping content? What's the difference between those two for those who maybe don't know?
Okay, that's a very, very interesting question. So I would say that's a very good question, man. If I'm just shipping content, to me, that sounds like there's not too much intent behind it. I'm just showing up for the sake of showing up. Whereas if I'm posting intentionally, like I don't make a video if it doesn't help my ICP in any way, shape, or form. I have deleted a YouTube channel with about 350 subscribers and about 75 videos on there purely because they don't speak to my ICP anymore. But if I was just shipping content, I would continue to feed that channel left, right, and center. But it doesn't serve me anymore. It's pointless. So I'm starting again completely from scratch with that. But to answer your question, shipping content to me, like it doesn't sound like it's part of a strategy. Whereas if you're posting intentionally, like every single video should realistically serve a purpose, and that purpose as a business owner should be to serve your ICP or to solve a problem for your ICP essentially. So that's what I think the difference is.
No, I agree. I mean, I think some things people get wrong at the beginning is
Hmm.
I think they maybe jump into execution too
Hmm.
soon, right? And that sounds counterintuitive, right? Because surely, yeah, okay, Colin, but surely I want to put stuff out there so that I can make stuff happen and get some inquiries and get some work going and you know keep the bills paid and so on, right? But yeah, yeah, you should. But the thing which people don't sometimes don't consider is actually what if what you're saying, yes, it's on brand to you, as in you are the niche in my view, but what if it doesn't respect the prospect's time, the person you're trying to talk to, the person who you're trying to ask for money or a value exchange, which is what we're asking for when we look for money, right? We're looking
Sure.
for a value exchange. Is that potentially adding, inspiring, educating, or etc. when it comes to the content? But I guess the question that comes, and maybe this is about you and your other half's like positioning as a whole, but like when a business is looking at doing marketing as a whole, this is a more general marketing question, and you're looking at maybe positioning, right? Like when you were coming up with your remote offering and you were looking at it, how were you? Did you do research? Did you like how did you go about your positioning? Because I think for me, the more I've been in business and the more I look at what we're doing, the more positioning has come to matter. And
Hmm.
actually, that's why I've come to that bit that I talked about earlier with long form stuff, where that's the key because it's on LinkedIn and because I know it's going to be consumed by a demographic in a certain mood. I need to make sure that content does a job in correspondence to when someone's scrolling at home on TikTok or scrolling on Shorts or scrolling on Instagram. So my positioning will be similar in regards to what I talk about, but it will be positioned in a different way. Just to
Hmm.
reiterate the question, I mean, how did you come up with your own positioning? And then maybe after that, how would you recommend people listening to this potentially come up with their own positioning themselves if they're in that process of either tweaking what they're doing or adapting as a whole?
Sure. So my positioning, I wanted to come from a position of what am I taking off your plate and how am I making your life easier rather than trying to sell how good my video editing is. When I was doing initial research on the market of video editing, a lot of the market, and when I say a lot, I mean like 95% of the market, they try and position themselves as one of the best editors you can work with, and they try and sell editing quality. So trying to sell what you're good at as opposed to trying to sell the problems you can solve for your ICP, it's not really a strong approach. And I wish I'd taken that approach from the very, very beginning because I did make that mistake at the start. But it's only when I was a solopreneur. But it's only when I went into a full on business with myself and my wife that we actually changed that positioning, and we just think we focused on how do I make these people's lives easier, as opposed to how do I show people how good I am, so to speak,
Yeah.
which I think is the wrong thing to do. So identifying what problem you solve as opposed to what benefit you give. Like it might sound similar, but from my experience, it's not. And that's kind of how I position myself in the video editing niche. So would I call myself an editor? Of course, but my main goal is not to provide you with high quality video editing. Obviously, that comes with the package, but my main goal is to alleviate your time, alleviate your stress, and give you another means to actually generate leads rather than just essentially saying, here's fantastic editing. Like, here, I'm going to blow your audience away with the quality of these videos. Like no one cares. Like, no one cares how good of an editor I am. No one cares of the level of the service you produce. They care about themselves, and they care about what problems that you solve, and the issues surrounding that are almost irrelevant, because you should be, any business really solves a problem. You go to a supermarket because you're hungry. Any business solves a problem. You go to B&Q because your bathroom's falling apart. It's a problem that needs solving. So that's essentially what we positioned ourselves as problem solvers. We need to help you alleviate your time back, so you can spend this on something that's going to keep business rolling in, as opposed to you're bogged down into editing your videos. So that's essentially the position that we came from.
What do you think people get wrong about editing?
I think digestibility is an overlooked factor. So I don't judge someone on how good quality their editing is. I judge on how well it delivers the information, and how well the video actually does its job on either promoting the individual, promoting the service, or just general positioning on the individual as a whole. So there's nothing wrong with producing content that's just captions and cuts. There's nothing wrong with that. You could probably run a 6 or 7 figure business off that. It's the value and message that you deliver. Like, I can only do so much as your editor. If you're taught, like, I'm not suggesting anyone I work with or anyone I've ever worked with does this, but if you're talking absolute garbage and you don't deliver any sort of value whatsoever in the business, in the video, sorry, the best editors in the world couldn't help you.
Mm.
That's the problem. So, but if you focus on delivering a good value message, and the video does its job of helping the digestibility of that message, that's a successful edit, in my opinion. So I don't really try and pay attention to all the bells and whistles. Before I press go on any sort of graphic that I add to a video, I think, does this help digest the message? If the answer is yes, I add it. If the answer is no, I let the video play.
Yeah.
And the amount of videos I've returned to to a client or a prospect, because I say, no, you need to do this again. I'm not actually getting anything of value out of this video. So rather than just accepting that and just saying no problem, I'll go ahead and edit the video, I actually do make the effort to give that back, because I care. I care about my clients. So, like, the digestibility of the video and the value received in that video, the value proposition of the video, realistically, I would say is the most overlooked aspect. So a video can be well edited, but if it doesn't deliver value, what's the point? It's like having a Ferrari F12 Beretta with no fuel in it. Like, what's the actual point? So that's one of the things that I talk about a lot.
I think I think for me there's a like, and the I guess the niche that we serve is people who could already go from concept to good in
Hmm.
regards to video delivery, how they come across, how they plan it, and of course, like, there's elements that we can help with, etc. Like, would you package your hook? Like, maybe have you thought about doing it this way, etc. Like, and working on that structural stuff before you start. But I think for me, the key is, like, the reason why you bring in a production professional, an editor, or both would be to take it from good to great. Because I
Hmm.
think the people who are going to be perceived as thought leaders, perceived as the people who are consistently listened to, they have, and actually, I would say the ones who are going to consistently grow, regardless of the doom and gloom on what the economy is going to do, arguably, it are the ones who A, show up with conviction, B, show up consistently, and then C, are hitting that great kind of line, or that, and that is kind of subjective to an extent, but there is certain metrics which make it great, which I'm sure we'll get into in a second. But,
Hmm.
like, for me, if you're not hitting great and you are hitting good, fantastic, but you should be then questioning, okay, how can you go to great? And if you are
Sure.
hitting great, how do you keep making your great become better and better and better on a 1% way? But for those who are listening, I mean, what like structurally could someone look at basic from a basic level point of view, either that they're going to try and implement themselves, or
Hmm.
work with someone from a guidance point of view to say, okay, well, you know, what could we look at that would really separate those two camps between someone who's good and someone who's great?
So first and foremost, you need to get your messaging right, and you need to get the structure of your content correct. So if anyone asks me, essentially, how do I structure my video? It's really not complicated. So here's what I advise: identify a problem that's going to be relatable to your ICP, resonate with the problem, i.e., you're not alone in feeling like this. Here's what I struggle with, or here's what people in your industry are struggling with. Identify how you actually solve that problem, i.e., provide value. So hypothetically, I could say, if you're struggling to generate leads on LinkedIn, you're not alone. Here's what I do to fix that. So I've clearly called out a problem that my ICP is having. I've resonated with that problem, and then I'm very clearly about to go into how I fix the problem. So I would say I do X, Y, Z in an ABC format. You can do this very much. You can do this quite as easily too. And then essentially, I would round it off by saying, remember to do XYZ as well. So kind of extra perceived value during the video. And then I always say, depending on the video itself, if it's short form, I don't tend to close with a call to action. I try and let the caption and the comments do that for me. But if it's YouTube, I tend to interrupt myself, or I recommend the clients interrupt themselves promoting the call to action. So we can touch upon that in a minute. But essentially, that's the structure, the basic structure that I would recommend, and it's really not too difficult to follow. But as a result, it works, and that's what I always recommend. But a lot of the time as well, I try and treat my clients with a bit of respect, because most of the people that I work with, they know what video is doing, they know the value of video, and they've actually been doing it for a long time. They just need to offload it. So
Yeah.
I try not to get in the way. I only step in when absolutely necessary. So I'm having to do that less and less and less, because I've raised the caliber of the people that I work with. Majority of the people I work with are founders, and like I said, they already know the value and they already know essentially what they're doing, and I don't get in the way. So, but if they ever need assistance, or if anyone listening ever needs assistance, that is essentially the structure that I follow. So identify the problem, resonate with the problem, offer a solution with the problem, and then add extra value at the end, essentially. So that's the basic structure to follow. So if you're looking to proceed, or looking to build on that, that's essentially what I would advise.
No, I completely agree, and I think I think there's kind of two two points that I would make here. One would be like in most cases, the reason why someone would hire a production professional or an editor is the time save, but that
Mm-hmm.
does then come with the question of, okay, well, how does AI fit into this? Because there is, I would argue, there is reasons and potential ways to use AI, and then there is other ways where we maybe shouldn't use AI. I'd be curious on your view. I mean, should we be using AI? Is it something that actually, I guess, the worst case scenario, like, is going to take all of our jobs, or actually is it just a part, or is it going to become just part of our workflows?
Oh, I use AI. I'm not shying away from that, and I'll say that without any shame whatsoever. But do I use AI to edit your videos? No. I use AI to help me identify hooks, help me identify structures, help me identify the captions, and help me generate captions. So I use it to amplify my deliverable, but I never lean on it way too much. So am I afraid that video editing will take? Sorry, I'll start that again. Am I afraid that AI will completely take over video editing? No. Can you use AI to actually take over your video editing now? Yes, you can. A lot of people lean on Opus. I would never recommend Opus for one simple reason only. It's crap. It's absolutely crap. You can very easily see an Opus video these days, and I get the fact that you're leaning on you're trying to alleviate time by doing so. I completely get that. If you're going to use Opus, I would use it to identify parts of the video that would actually make a good clip, because it does rank them in terms of virality. So I would lean on AI to actually assist with what you're doing. Don't use AI to actually completely take over the deliverable. That's just wrong, because your client could literally do that themselves. They just yeah. So I use AI. Everyone uses AI, but I use it in a constructive manner. I use it one that's structurally coherent with what we actually do at Precision, and I never ever let AI take over the workflow. There is always a set of eyes on your work. AI just helps accelerate and fine tune the process. So, am I afraid AI will take over my process? No. To answer the question,
Do you think? I guess. I mean, you say we'll use ops, but there's other clippers, of course, that are available. I mean, when you say it's crap, like what makes it crap, right?
there's no variety. There's no the cuts are a bit unreliable. There's no all the subtitles and the caption formats. They all look the same. So yes, you can pump out videos on at mass at scale, but one of the main reasons to get on video is to actually help people resonate with you and help people trust you and help show your levels of authority. And if you're just leaning on a format that loads of people do to actually do that, you're not showing any individuality whatsoever. That's just so uninspiring, in my opinion. To say it's crap is probably a little bit harsh, but I stand by it. It is that's just my opinion of it, and I don't say that because I'm threatened by it. I see it as quite lazy. um, it's not too difficult to actually like it. I understand some people have budgetary restraints and they might not be able to hire an editor just yet, but it's not too difficult to actually self teach yourself the basics and just get on CapCut or get on Premiere Pro and spend a bit of time in actually producing that until you're at the point where you can offload this. So yeah, that's essentially where I stand.
I think. I think for me, and as someone who uses clippers, who uses editors, I I personally have a slightly different view. I get where you
Sure.
come from with it, but like my view is you should be right. It should be and it's kind of what I sort of treat when it comes to the long form LinkedIn conversation I had earlier, which is like your premier, what I call your premier content, your really top of the line, very like the stuff you script, the stuff you put a lot of time and energy into, the stuff that the production is really sways, etc. That should go to an editor. That should have
Yeah.
motion graphics on it. That should have really captivating subtitles, etc. But if you have a clip or a set of clips from a podcast that it's maybe something you're testing. Maybe it's
Mhm.
maybe you want to find the best clip out of a podcast, or you want to get a starting point if you're doing it, or your editor wants to get a starting point, or both. I think that's where AI can serve. It's not
I
to
agree.
necessarily replace an editor. I think they do different jobs in the same way. You would use a screwdriver in some respects. You would also use a hammer in other respects, right? I think the premium brands, the ones that are going to, I would argue, attract the attention, which in turn is they attract the right clients for them for their either unique selling proposition or their ISP, are going to be the ones who use both, right?
Mhm.
Because I think if you, and maybe sometimes where the term comes from and where AI slop comes from, or like your very visceral reaction when I talked about clipping and using AI, I think comes from is because it can be leaned into and can be maybe over leveraged in respect to like, oh, I can just replace you with this thing,
Yeah.
right? And I think in a with a mix, I think is the best maybe middle ground. And I think actually either A as a mix or B as a starting point is where the value potentially can be there.
I agree.
And I think you need to understand, like, in some ways you need to rank your content. You need to say, because if you're going to be daily on LinkedIn, in the nicest way possible, you probably haven't got the budget, or but I personally don't have the budget at the moment to be doing 7 weekly, like daily videos that are all A star, A star, A star,
Sure.
A star. I would love to, but the reality is going to be like my constraint is time, the same with everyone, cost, the same with everyone to an extent. But for me, I look at it as a kind of the averages, right? So if I'm doing 7 videos, as long as 4 out of those 7 are A or A star, then actually the average can be, then they can be supported by something that's maybe ops clips or maybe a live stream or maybe a written post, etc. Right? I think once you start looking at your content and your marketing in tiers, especially on socials, and then optimizing for what the platforms want you to do, then you have more of a larger ecosystem that then allows you to create the best of both worlds, right?
I agree.
And that's why I think it's not. And I'm always a bit hesitant when people say, "Oh, you should do AI or an editor or etc." I think it should be right within reason. I think because as I say, I think some things need that human nuance, need that human shape, and others are just like it kind of goes into that camp of I've got this idea, let me just bang, here you go, right? Like
Mhm.
when I have an idea for a new video concept, like something that's been working for me this year is doing phone videos to test the tonality, and then I'll potentially film that as a walk-in video on a mirrorless camera. Okay, cool. So I'm up in the production quality, but then I'll maybe want to add captions on it quickly so it can be consumed better on those
Sure.
platforms. But I'm still in that testing phase with that terminology. So maybe it would be slightly overkill for me to get an editor in to do a really polished version of it. So that's when like AI can play in or like those other things. But just to move
Fair.
back, I guess, I think as a whole, if you're not doing something consistently, I don't believe you can gain competency in whatever that is. So if it's presenting, if it's coming across on video, which will be the common ones we're going to discuss today, but how do people actually get consistent? Because it's very easy for us to sit here and say, "Oh, well, be consistent," as
Sure.
we are consistent, right? But how would you say for people who are listening to this, how can they actually become consistent?
For me, I would advise you need to remove as much friction as possible. So I'll use myself as an example, and this is what I always advise my clients to do. Where I work is my recording studio, and my recording studio is where I work. So everything is in a permanent position, light, phone, microphone, everything, it doesn't move. So there's roughly about 5 minutes difference between me turning on the camera and the footage actually being ready for me on my laptop. So if you've entered the habit where you think, oh God, I need to record today, I need to set up my camera, I need to set up everything, I need to clear the table, that makes it much less likely that you'll actually do it consistently. So by removing friction, you're able to make it a habit. And once you're able to make it a habit, it actually returns dividends much more easily. So it's very easy to develop that habit when you remove friction. And any habit that any phrase, sorry, no, any process that you need to get into where it starts with you saying to yourself, oh, for fuck's sake, you're going to find it difficult to get consistent on that. So remove as much friction as possible. That's always what I advise.
I agree, and I think there's like little things like a build a habit around creating a phone piece of content, and that's the yardstick you need to start doing. Build a
Mm-hmm.
habit of I've got this idea, I'm going to write it down. I'm going to build this habit around. I'm going to film this idea as I have it, etc. Because I think sometimes we make excuses about why we're not doing the thing, right?
Yep.
So like I think it's very common. Maybe in January, people are maybe concerned about what's going to happen, or like they're trying to create work and like deal with and talk to more prospects. But like for me, I did a what I would call a SWOT analysis where I looked at okay, well, what are my strengths from last year? What are my weaknesses from last year? What need gains or advances on? And then what are my like total pool of resources that I can then allocate to those things? Right, that's the job of a SWOT analysis in my view. And for me, the weaknesses was actually I'm good and I enjoy marketing, right? So that's quite easy for me to do. But the
Mm-hmm.
thing that I struggle with more or do less of that I'm focusing more on this year is actually that middle section between actually getting the calls in and getting people to maybe convert, or actually reminding people, hey, like, we can do this and this is how much that would cost. And I guess for me, like, is that partly why someone would maybe outsource to you? You talked about earlier about like saving that time. If
Mm-hmm.
they notice that actually they are, and I remember hearing Alex Camusi talk about this multiple times, and I'll just use a quick analogy. You know, he was talking about the fact that you're not disciplined if you enjoy it. So he was talking to a lot of personal trainers around like, oh, I wake up at 5, I do this work, I do this workout, da da da. Yeah, but he was like, you fucking enjoy it. Like, stop being a prick, you enjoy it, right? And the crux that what he was pointing out was discipline is showing up when you don't want to do it. But
Mm-hmm.
actually, if you're doing the thing that you enjoy, arguably you would have done it anyway. So the real quote unquote discipline, and the thing that I'm leaning into a little bit more now is I don't really want to do this as this is uncomfortable, and I still need to do it consistently, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because that's where the results come from. That's where compounding happens. But just to reiterate the question, I guess, what would you say to people who are struggling with being disciplined with their videos? And is that actually why you would then recommend people then outsource something like you so they have that time block allocation in regards to funds so they can then refocus on the bit I mentioned here, which was those calls and that closing?
Right. I think if someone is struggling to be disciplined with videos, I don't think they are the people I want to work with just yet.
Okay.
Because the people I want to work with are already disciplined with it. They know the value of it. They've just sinking way too much time into the editing and it's becoming a bottleneck. But in order to get disciplined by in order to stay disciplined in terms of the video content, I like to, what's the word I'm looking for? It's difficult for me because I bloody love it. But I understand a lot of people might not be in the same position.
Because I think,
Um,
especially, sorry to cut you off, but I think especially
sure.
at the beginning, right, people hate it, right, and that's the thing I was
Yeah.
going to say. Like, they hate how they sound, they hate how they look, they don't feel confident. Like, it's different when you've been doing it 10 years and it's just second nature to you.
Hmm.
But it's not for everyone, especially when
It
they start
isn't.
out. Like, they might have loads to say and they might actually eventually become really good at it, and especially when they add that extra sauce on top with editing and etc. But like, that's why I mentioned, like, sometimes you have to show up and do the thing you don't want to do, because that's the thing that's going to move the needle for your business.
Oh, 100%. Like I said earlier, the most boring actions repeated daily produce the sexiest results. So if producing a video a day to you is absolutely boring, and that's not really something you feel like is going to move the needle, well, newsflash, it really is. Like if you're consistent with that every day, believe me, that really is. But put it into perspective. Obviously, we all know who Mr. Beast is. He posted 447 videos before he actually got any sort of traction whatsoever. Admittedly, he actually fell in love with the process, and that's why obviously he's at the insane level where he is today. But that's besides the point. But the daily actions, if video is one of them, and you get over that, just think to yourself, what else can you achieve? You know, if that's something you genuinely hate or but know you need to do it, like for case in point, none of us like doing cold outreach. Like none of us like doing it at all, but it's something we know we have to do, and I'm at peace with it. So I would advise, if you want to get consistent doing that, target the morning. Target
Mm.
before you actually get on with any sort of work. Because if you wait until the evening, trust me, you're burnt out. You're done with the day. You just think, oh, I can't be fucked. I'll do it tomorrow. But I developed that as a bit of a daily habit. So any recording sessions I do, I've made sure that the morning is targeted for that, because I feel like I'm most productive in the morning. And you could be a night owl for all I know. Like obviously, if it works for you, it works for you. But if recording to you feels like part of the bottleneck work, and it starts to feel like, oh, I don't really want to do this. It, have you ever heard the phrase, once you see results, it starts to become an addiction? That's essentially, that's a phrase a lot of people go to the gym say. But once you actually start doing this, like just like you've been to the gym, if you force yourself to go to the gym for 2 weeks straight, you're going to see results.
Yeah.
It's the same with video. It is absolutely the same with video. So if you're consistent with it for a couple of weeks, or even a month, depending on how long it takes, once you start to see the results, you won't want to stop. Just like when I started doing cold outreach and I forced myself to do it, and I actually started getting some results because I did it for so long and I was so disciplined with it, I thought, I'm not giving this up. You will get bitten by that bug when it comes to video. I guarantee it. So if you if you just grind it out and force yourself to do it, if you dislike it, but if you force yourself to do it, it will inevitably produce dividends, in my opinion.
No, I agree, and it's interesting that you mentioned cold outreach, because I think so many people, like, I've told and froed about cold and like outreach as a whole, but like something that I've tried to do and focus on doing, like for me personally this year as the business, is like consistently fill in that gap that I talked about as well. Because like, I'm naturally good at marketing is
Mhm.
never going to be the challenge for me ever. Creating content isn't going to be the challenge for me. Writing emails isn't going to be the challenge for me. Except it's not going to be the problem that I run into. The thing that I have tried to do is backward shift my day in the
Mhm.
same way to you. So everything that I'm going to find really grr and really horrible and really hard, I'll do first thing, right? Because I then don't have an excuse, because I don't get to do the stuff I enjoy, like this show, until I've done the follow-ups, until I've done the
Love it.
lead gen,
Love it.
until I've done the cold outreach. Because I don't get that, because I remember a long time ago, and I recommend if anyone hasn't, they look up the book called Mind Hacking. It's basically
Mhm.
about creating systems in your head where you give yourself rewards, and you only do things like you do a hard thing, then you give yourself a reward, right?
Mhm.
So let's say, for example, you really want to record a video, you want to script a video, you want to jump on a live stream or whatever it is. If that's something that you count as a reward, or you see as a reward, okay, you only get to do that reward if you do something you absolutely detest, absolutely don't like the idea of. That might be ringing three businesses you don't know. That might be reminding four ex clients that you are still offering something, or you've got something to offer, and you send them some messages, and you call your leads or work your leads, or etc. And I think once you take the averages out of that, actually you're going to show up better in video, because you know all the hard work's done. So your
Mhm.
cognitive load is going to be lower because you've done the hard shit already today. So it's like, actually, well, this live stream's a piece of piss then already, isn't it? Or like when something else goes wrong, it's like, well, actually, that's I've done the thing that would absolutely terrified me. And again, if that's for video for you, for those who are listening, then start with your videos, right? Like, it has to be the thing which you're going to find that requires you. Oh, I don't want to do this, you
Love
know.
it.
And I think that's the reason why I would argue that anyone listening who does this will have a more successful year than they had previously. But I
Mhm.
guess as a final thought, I mean, has your definition, and this could be quite wooey, but like, has your definition of success changed across the last couple of years?
Absolutely. Absolutely. So when I started, obviously my passion for video was still as strong as it is today. I envision myself having thousands of subscribers, thousands of views, and thousands of comments, and just making thousands and thousands upon YouTube ad revenue. And I thought, and then when I come to this point, that is a thought that everyone has when they start, but it's also the most damaging thought. So if I completely and utterly directed all my attention to that from the start, yes, I might probably get that, but would I have a business? No. Would I have more of a purpose? No. I'm essentially just showing up on camera and not actually doing anything with it.
Mm.
So my definition of success now is the inversion of my video content, let's say. If that starts genuine conversations, that is success. I don't care how many views it gets. I don't care how many levels of likes or comments or shares it gets, as long as it produces something which then I can actually build on. So one thing I've noticed, and this is a huge, huge advantage for starting video content. If anyone listens to this, please take this away. Your video content can become a self-replenishing content loop. So you post a video on XYZ topic, someone comments, you have a little bit of a back and forth in the comments. You take that comment section, that comment thread, that is the basis of your next video. You can even mention it by name. Me and Tony had a bit of a back and forth on this topic. Here's what was said. Here's the summary of it. Here's my opinion. What do you think? Tony himself has probably got a comment. So nice one. I remember this because how often do you get into a comment thread with someone and then they lift that comment thread and post it on a video and mention you and like, oh my God, I'm in their video like that. That's absolutely insane. And I've started doing that. And as a result, it just gets more and more and more engagement. It kind of compounds like that. So the more actions your video actually produces, the more you can actually build on further videos, essentially. So, like I said, it becomes a self-replenishing content loop. And then realistically, if you ride that wave for long enough, I don't think you'd ever have to scratch your head and think what to talk about ever again. So I've only just started doing that, but I found that was incredibly powerful. So that is the metric of success for me. What I produce, has it produced some what I've produced in terms of video, has it actually returned any sort of meaningful conversation? And if it sparks a meaningful conversation, it can lead anywhere. It can lead to more content, it can lead to a chat in the DMs, it could potentially lead to a sales call. So every video, I just want to reach out to essentially one person. That's all. I don't care how the other video does in terms of engagement. I don't care how it does in comments. And that's what I try and preach to people. So, like, I have a lot of people on who I service in terms of YouTube content. And if you looked externally, you'd think I'm terrible at my job. But realistically, they didn't hire me to get thousands and thousands of views. They hired me to generate business from the content I helped them produce. So the more specific you are in terms of what you talk about on camera, which you're probably going to speak directly to your ICP, and you should be. That's the goal. It's not going to get thousands of views. It's just not. It doesn't matter because you're speaking to a direct type of person, and it might only get 10, 20, 30 views. But if one of those views turns into a conversation, and that conversation turns into a sales conversation, that sales conversation turns into money for your business, that video's done its job.
Yeah.
Do you want to go viral? I mean, I had this conversation with my wife the other day. I said, one of my biggest fears is actually going viral because, correct me if I'm wrong, unless you sell to everyone, what's the bloody point? If I produce a video and it goes viral, I've done something wrong because I've not been speaking to my ICP. All of a sudden, I've got thousands of views, thousands of comments, thousands of people reaching out to me potentially in terms of following, which on paper sounds great. But how many of those people am I actually going to be able to service? Probably less than 1%. And now I'm stuck with an audience that I can do nothing with. And I'm snowed under with that. So going viral, and like I said, unless you're speaking to everyone, is one of the worst things that can happen to your business, I would say. So
I mean,
success
yeah.
for me, have I helped one person as a result of my video who would be classed as my ICP? If the answer is yes, that's success for me. Do that over and over and over and over and over again. That's success.
No, I'd agree. I mean, I think, there's loads of examples I could use here, but the one that jumps to mind is there was an article a couple of years ago talking about the fact that this, I don't know the name the influencer, but it was referring to influencers as a whole. And we'll use like 1 million followers, just as an example. It could have been 10 million, could have been 100K, it doesn't really matter. But they had a significant amount of followers, and the entire article was talking about they couldn't even sell a t shirt because people specifically were following that person because of maybe a viral trend, or they went viral, quote unquote. And I guess this is the argument that we both, I think, agree on, the less views but high yield
Yeah.
side of it, which is actually my videos might only get X, right? As in whatever that X number is, your average, right? It could be 100 views, etc. Or, let's use 100 for example. How would you actually feel? And the thing that I reframe and I help with people reframe on this is, yes, on Instagram or LinkedIn or whatever it is, you may see 100 or 1,000, right? But just think for a second about how many that is in actual people, right?
Mm-hmm.
If they were stood in front of you, you having the same conversation with the same video, doing the same thing, but they were stood in front of you, right? And I think when people say, "Oh, I only got 100 views," when they reframe it like that and they look at going, "Hold on, how many is 100 people?" It's like, Jesus Christ, you know what I mean? Like, there's so many. That's actually a lot of people. And even if one of those people resonate with the message at the right time for them, as we've discussed today, like a lot of that could be worth thousands for your business.
Absolutely.
Right? As
Absolutely.
a whole. I think that's the key. And I guess it's like, and I had Ryan on the podcast a couple of weeks ago, who serves a quite different niche. Like, he serves what I would call virality or controversial podcasts.
Mm-hmm.
And he does trailers. That's what he specializes in. Incredibly good. I recommend you go watch the episode if that's what you're interested in. But like, we were talking about the fact that actually for his niche, it's the opposite, because a lot of what his clients want is, we get X number of views, so they can go to the sponsor, they can go to whatever it is and say, we get 100K views. Cool.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so they're probably going to get paid more, whether it's through direct ad money on YouTube or through their sponsors, if their trailer or podcast or whatever it is get 1 million views in correspondence to it got like 20, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think they're different models, and that's what
Absolutely,
I'm starting to understand now. It's like, actually, yeah, you should look to get more views. Yes, you should. That should be an objective. But the key, if you're in this camp, which we're talking about today, is it should be more of the right views, not just more views for the sake of views. It should be more of the right views. But for those who've really enjoyed this conversation, Connor, and want to connect with you, want to see what you do editing-wise, maybe want to talk to you about doing editing in that respect, I mean, where's best for people to reach out to you?
Sure. So you can reach out to myself or my lovely wife on LinkedIn. So my full name, Connor, Connor, Clayton, Clayton. And you can find my wife, Samantha Clayton, as well on LinkedIn. Or you can go to our website directly, our brand new shiny website, precisionedits.co.uk.
Fabulous. And if you were going to give advice to your younger self 10 to 15 years ago, what piece of advice would you specifically give to that person?
I love that question. I absolutely love that question. I'd imagine you've had the smart ass on here say, buy Bitcoin.
I haven't, but...
Oh, fair enough.
There you go.
No, I wouldn't say that. No, I actually wouldn't say that. Honestly, I would say it's the phrase that I said earlier. The most boring work repeated over and over and over again produces the sexiest results. So I would say personally, define the niche early, stick to it, don't deviate, keep repeating the same action, and you will gain the benefits. You will gain the benefits. The most boring work produces the sexiest results.
Unfortunately, you will probably suffer in getting those results.
Yeah, you probably would. Yeah,
what you were implying as well. But thank you so much for coming back and joining me. If you did enjoy this episode of What's Missing in Marketing today, then make sure to be subscribed to YouTube. Believe you'll enjoy this video, and why not subscribe so you do not miss next week's episode. And I'll see you very, very soon.